The New Silk Road. In 2013, Beijing unveiled the Belt and Road Initiative, a trillion-dollar vision to rebuild the trade arteries of the ancient Silk Road. By land, it connects Asia to Europe. By sea, it stretches into the Indian and Atlantic Oceans. China called it a road of peace and prosperity. The world called it a strategy for dominance. But behind every speech, there was a blueprint, a chain of ports, logistics hubs, and naval gateways. Each one built under the same promise: infrastructure for today, influence for tomorrow. The ports that tell the story. It began here, in Djibouti, a small nation at the Horn of Africa, the gateway to the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. In 2017, China opened its first overseas military base here, just kilometers from an American one. Officially, it was for anti-piracy operations. In reality, it was a strategic foothold at the heart of global trade. Next came Mombasa, Kenya's busiest port. Built with Chinese loans, operated by Chinese engineers. It promised growth, but came with strings. When debts piled up, whispers began. If Kenya cannot pay, will China take the port? Then Nigeria, Africa's giant, joined the wave. The Lekki deep-sea port, part financed and operated by Chinese firms. Designed to be the largest in West Africa, a new gateway not just for Nigeria, but for China's trade across the Atlantic. From the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean, Chinese companies now hold stakes in over 40 African ports. Together, they form a quiet network, a maritime architecture of power. The strategy of control. The genius of China's approach is subtlety. No invasions, no coups, no colonial flags. Just contracts, loans, and partnerships. China offers infrastructure, ports, railways, highways. In return, nations offer access and loyalty. And when debts rise beyond what can be paid, China gains operational control. It is not conquest by sword, it is conquest by spreadsheet. Economists call it debt trap diplomacy. Beijing calls it win-win cooperation. But beneath both lies the truth. Whoever controls the ports controls the sea. And whoever controls the sea controls the future. Africa's double-edged choice. For Africa, the ports are both a blessing and a warning. They promise trade, jobs, and modernity, but they also bring dependency and vulnerability. In some nations, Chinese firms collect port fees, manage terminals, and train local staff. In others, they control logistics chains from the port to the inland highways. When the port no longer belongs to the people, the sea no longer serves the nation. A new form of colonialism has no governor, no army, no anthem, only contracts and silence. The geopolitical game. The oceans are not water, they are power routes. 90% of the world's trade moves by sea, and whoever shapes the ports shapes the world. What began as trade is now strategy. Each port China builds doubles as a logistics base, a potential naval outpost, a node in the world's most ambitious geopolitical network. While the West debates democracy and aid, China quietly builds cranes, docks, and influence. The empire is no longer land-bound. It sails on steel hulls and invisible agreements. The Atlantic frontier. The next chapter unfolds on the Atlantic coast, where Africa meets the Americas and global trade converges. China is no longer just looking east, it is turning west toward the Atlantic. toward ports like Lekki, Abidjan, and Dakar. Here lies the gateway to Latin America, Europe, and the US markets. It is the missing piece of China's global puzzle. The Atlantic, the last sea where Western powers still believe they hold dominance. But China is patient. It does not conquer, it connects. The African response. Yet across Africa, a new awareness grows, that true sovereignty cannot live on borrowed docks, that the future must be built, not bought. Nations like Morocco, Egypt, and South Africa are developing their own port networks, strategic, regional, independent. The Atlantic Initiative, the Tanger-Med model, and new continental trade corridors are signals.
Africa is learning the language of power and beginning to speak it in its own tongue.
The Empire at Sea. The empires of the past were built on land. The empires of tomorrow will be built on ports. No armies, no flags, only access and endurance. In the quiet of every African harbor, you can hear it, the echo of a question. Who owns the sea? Who shapes the destiny of the shore? China has made its move. The West watches. But Africa must decide what story the sea will tell. Because whoever commands the ports commands the century.